So I watched the Sean Hannity interview with Bruce Jenner, and I wanted to point out, and I'm not going to call him Caitlyn Jenner. I wanted to point out a lot of things with that. Number one, a lot of people don't understand what we call fiscal conservative in this country, in the United States of America. To the rest of the world is known as laissez-faire capitalism. Okay? Laissez-faire capitalism is liberal. Okay? That combined with the fact that Bruce Jenner is also socially liberal, as stated, makes Bruce Jenner a liberal, plain and simple. However, it makes her, him, whatever, a liberal that supports trickle-down economics, which is unfortunately not workable. I don't think that anybody with a brain ever thinks that trickle-down economics works. In fact, George H.W. Bush referred to it as voodoo economics because it's stupid and it's obvious that it doesn't work. On the face of it, it's obvious. Now, the reason some people fall for trickle-down economics is they think that billionaires and trillionaires now, because there's now trillionaires, think like they think. They don't, or they wouldn't be millionaires or billionaires or trillionaires, okay? What do I mean by they think that billionaires and millionaires and trillionaires think like they do? What I mean is that the average person thinks that, they have a little surplus, so they'd like to give their little tithing to church, or they like to give a little bit back to their neighbors through a food bank or something like that. That's how the average person thinks. That's why the average person is not a millionaire or a billionaire or a trillionaire. Although I should say that's not how the average person thinks anymore. That's how the average person thought in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, etc. But since I'd say the mid-90s to through now, everything has become very consumeristic, very self-centered. It's a sham. I mean, society is now, it is now like we are living in the Matrix, but it's a self-manufactured economic matrix. It's everything's fake at this point, except the technology. The technology will be our savior, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So he supports trickle-down economics, which we already know doesn't work, and I just explained why it doesn't work. The reason why is because when you give money to billionaires and trillionaires, whether it's being given by Ronald Reagan or George W. Bush or Barack Hussein Obama or Donald Trump, especially under Donald Trump, or Joe Biden, it doesn't work because these people take this money. Now, I will get into this. The ones that actually had the most safeguards to protect the people from the billionaires and trillionaires were people like George W. Bush with his Economic Empowerment Act, and then the current thing that, what's-his-face, Joe Biden is doing. So Biden and George W. Bush kind of have the most workable concept of trickle-down economics, okay? They have the most reasonable, but they're also the most least insane. Like they have the most, they put a leash on the corporations. They put a leash on the people that can just take that money and go on vacation and crap like they did under Trump, like they did under Reagan. It doesn't really matter who's handing out the corporate welfare. What matters is the fact that it's happening and it doesn't work. This is backwards thinking. It's backward socialism is what it is. It really is idiotic. Anybody that thinks it works, because the idea is, well, if you give the trillionaires money, they'll hire more people and pay their people more. No, they won't. It just doesn't happen. And I'm going to leave links in the description of other people that have ripped this apart, including Lauren Southern, including Tucker Carlson, including conservatives that have ripped this apart. And I'm going to get into, like, some capitalists, like capitalism has made things more, it put things more in reach. I think Amazon is a good example of this. One of the things I find interesting about Amazon, although it could be done better by the government, and people are like, no, it can't, Yes, it can. especially if the government functioned like the government used to function. But the one thing that Amazon has done is it has put nutritionally good food, within the reach of the average person, to the point where it really has eradicated food deserts. Especially now that they take food stamps and things like that, you can't say that you live in a food desert with Amazon, because Amazon gives you it everywhere throughout the United States. So it has actually eradicated food deserts. It's put nutritional supplements in the hands of the average person. It's put exercise equipment in the hands of the average person. It's put a lot in the hands of the average person. Put hydroponic equipment in the hands of the average person so they can get off of the system, you know what I mean? Off of the, they don't have to depend on the structure the way it is. They can become productive but that's only if they're using their brain and buying the things that are worthwhile and not simply buying garbage. Okay, but that is one thing I will say. Amazon has really put a lot of things into the reach of the average person, just like Walmart did before them. So it's not all negative. However, when the employees aren't making anything and qualify for government assistance, it might make more sense just to have the government as the primary producer and distributor of the goods. There was a saying, I forget who, there was allegedly a KGB agent that defected to the United States that said, "You know, you have mastered the art of marketing in the United States. In Soviet Russia, we have corn. In the United States, you have 60 kinds of corn." Meaning that we have Del Monte, we have Dole, we have whoever the brands are. I buy store brand whenever I buy anything, so I'm not real up on what the different brands are. But that's the thing is, also what's interesting, and I'll leave a link to it, in the Soviet Union, people had better access to food. The average person had better access to food, according to the Central Intelligence Agency, nourishing food. Okay, so you have to keep that into mind too. But I do think that in some ways, Amazon has put more things in the reach of the average consumer. So, getting back to Caitlyn Jenner's backwards ideas. Well, first I'll get into this. There was a chick, Maria Konovalenko, who is an anti-aging activist, although I don't think ever since she married her hubby, I don't think she's as active as she once was. She's a PhD in biology, but she's an anti-aging activist. Check her out at mariakonovalenko.wordpress.com and check out her YouTube channel. It has limited videos, whatever. But the thing is, her and her comrades in Russia had created an international party called the Longevity Party. And the thing is, we need to embrace technology and stop thinking in a backward nature. We have to embrace all of technology. If you think about it, if the same money, like for example, if DARPA went from funding only military projects and started funding domestic investment projects and how to fully automate the production of automobiles or fully automate the production of food, which is possible, but could be made better through DARPA, or invested in which they are doing for the military, how to suck water out of the air so that you can get water in arid regions to drink and to water crops. These are the things that we need to make society sustainable. These are the things that can be obtained if the government funded things like this. Like I brought up how China is funding the forestation of Tibet, of the Tibetan Plateau. Genius! Genius! Why aren't we doing that in Arizona? Why aren't we doing that in California? Why aren't we doing that? Period. Or desalination, like takes place in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, in Israel. Okay, why aren't we doing that? Well, that's because environmentalism gets in the way, but that's besides the point. This is the problem with how George Lincoln Rockwell said it's cancer. When you have these different things that go against one another, that is a form of cancer. Our country is run by cancer, and you need to excise that cancer and cauterize it so it does not come back. Now that cancer comes in the form of special interest groups and corporations and all sorts of crap. I do think, and I'll leave a link to it, when Alexandria Cortez was primarily calling out corruption, she was excellent. I was about ready to propose to her. I mean, she was doing a damn good job calling out corruption. And then she switched up and became anti-white supremacy and all this crap, although I'm sure she was before, but that became her shtick after that, which I think is a big mistake, a big mistake. So Caitlyn Jenner, or Bruce Jenner's backward thinking, which is traditional liberalism, not liberalism, but this mainstream liberalism, it's anti-progressive, but make no mistake, he is a liberal. I think what people lose track of, like for example, Caitlyn Jenner, or Bruce Jenner, or whatever he's calling himself, when I watched the interview with Sean Hannity, you know, I could probably hang out with Bruce Jenner and have a good time. You know what I mean? He doesn't seem like a bad person, but the thing is, just because somebody's not a bad person does not make them a competent politician. That's the problem that I think the average American has. And people are like, well, you could hang out with Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, you could do that. I think a lot of people have the mistake I come off as like some kind of major bigoted lunatic on here. I'm not. The thing is with transgenderism, I do believe that transgendered folks do suffer from severe gender dysphoria, but I don't think, this is the thing. In the United States, we have a very unique culture, okay? And that needs to be preserved, regardless of what kind of governing structure we have in the country. So, for example, we have very Anglo ideas of how to run society with individual rights and things of that nature. So that happens with individual rights, such as the right to be a freak, like a transgendered person. So it's not anybody's right to tell any of these people what they can and cannot do. That's not your right, and it's not their right to tell you that you have to accept it. That's where the trick comes in. They do not have well, they do have the right to tell you that you have to accept it, but you're obligated and allowed to not accept it. That's what is unique to the Anglosphere, to Anglo-Saxon values that favor individual liberty, which must be preserved at all costs. What also makes the United States unique is not only are we part of the Anglosphere, and not only do we have similar values to England and Canada and other places like that, who have lost these values, mind you. They have lost these values that favor individualism. But we also have a uniqueness in the idea of collectivization, going all the way back to the Puritans. And people will go, well, now you're saying that the United States started when the Puritans came to the United States. In a sense, yes, it did. Our value system in this country started when the Puritans came to the United States. If you look, it evolved as other groups had come after them. One of the prime groups that came, which also favors collectivization, is the Quakers. Okay? And then you have the Mennonites. The Mennonites were nowhere near as moral as either the Quakers or the Puritans, but you have these three groups that are Christian, and they're centered in Christian morality. But that morality goes farther back than Christianity. A lot of it goes back to German and Anglo-Saxon common law, and back to when the Anglo-Saxons and other Germanic people were tribal. A lot of it has to do with the open field planning of system and communitarianism. That's a part of the bedrock of this country, and that must be preserved regardless of what the system of governance is. It has not been preserved. Our strict family values in this country. See, that's what differentiates the United States from Europe. We retained a lot of the strict family values. When this country first, when the colonies were here, the Puritan colonies, we didn't have Christmas in the United States. Why? Because Christmas is a pagan holiday of excess, drunkenness, and debauchery. It was excised from our culture because it was considered an evil holiday. What you also see, and you can see the stark differentiation between how Anglo-America was colonized versus how South America, Latin America was colonized. It actually was a problem in the sense that because we decided in the United States to favor supporting the individual liberties of the Native Americans to pursue their own destiny, it allowed the Native Americans to unify into a confederation and attack us, to attack the settlers, to commit terrorist actions against the settlers, which caused, unfortunately, the almost complete eradication of the native population. But more important than that is the fact that the respect for individual liberties, up until the point we could not respect the individual liberties of these people anymore, although we did. Because if you think about it, how many conquering civilizations give their subjects, the Native Americans, who would be the subjects of Anglo-America because we conquered them, how many conquering civilizations give their conquered people free land, free medicine, free education, free food, tax-exempt status, not demanding tributes, tax-exempt status, the ability to vote in our elections, although not immediately, but they're not technically U.S. citizens, and basically casino gaming rights that, like, if I set up a casino, I'll go to prison. But the Native Americans were given casino gambling rights so that they could make money to enrich their families, to enrich their tribe. That is not the nature of a conquered people. That's the nature of a people that needed to be domesticated because they were not assimilating properly, whereas the Spaniards and the Portuguese forced assimilation on the indigenous populations. And for the one yuppie, I'm going to leave links to different things. There was a yuppie that was a friend of mine, former friend of mine, and he stated that, you make these wild claims like there was cannibalism in the pre-Columbian Americas, especially North America, because everybody knows that the Native Americans in the New World and then what's now the United States and Canada, they were good people that wanted to help the evil Anglo-Americans. No, they weren't. They were cannibalistic maniacs. That's the reality of the situation. If the English never came here, they'd still be killing and eating each other, most likely. Or be subdued by the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, and these other cultures that were more evolved from South and Central America, who would be then killing and eating the less advanced people. I didn't mean to say evolved. I don't want YouTube to get all touchy on that. But the fact of the matter is, somebody would be subduing somebody, and it would not turn out as nice as the Anglo-Saxon subjugation of them. That's the thing, that's the reality of the situation there. So ultimately, my view on the whole Caitlyn Jenner rigmarole is, if you support somebody like Caitlyn Jenner and call yourself a conservative, you probably have been brainwashed by basically by the internet, by the people on the internet, by the media, including the conservative media, who's now thrown full on behind Caitlyn Jenner, and by other people. What am I frightened of with this? Well, the thing is, if the Caitlyn Jenner run for California is successful, or if it's not successful, either way, the Trump and Romney people that support Caitlyn might make her run for presidente. I am looking very much forward to Tulsi Gabbard running as a Republican, and I will leave links to all of the Republican views that Tulsi Gabbard has, including securing our border, doing good things for our military, supporting the military, and also her views on transgendered, bisexual, whatever people. Tulsi Gabbard is a conservative, plain and simple. Okay? So I have this idea that Tulsi Gabbard should run in 2024. If, my fear, this is my primary fear, if they run Bruce Jenner against Tulsi Gabbard, they will bring up Tulsi Gabbard's anti-homosexual, anti-trans, anti-whatever statements that she has made. Now, mind you, Tulsi Gabbard probably has a similar view to me. I think that gay, trans, straight, bi, whatever, as long as you're not breaking the law, it's not my place to tell you what to do. And I think that's what Tulsi Gabbard's point is. I don't think, as Tulsi Gabbard had stated when she said she was tired of these homosexual extremists, I don't think that gays or anyone else, gays, blacks, indigenous, whatever, I don't think anyone deserves any more rights than anyone else, which is what the LGBTQIAP plus movement has been trying. Wow, I actually remembered that. Which is what they've been trying to do from the beginning. They want especial rights. You don't get special rights. Special rights are called privileges. So in my opinion, if they run Caitlyn Jenner or Bruce Jenner against Tulsi Gabbard, I fear that they will portray Tulsi Gabbard as an anti-homosexual extremist, although she's not, and that she will lose. They will say, "Oh my God, you're bullying trans people," and she'll lose. That's my fear. I fear that if they run, now mind you, Tulsi Gabbard is not necessarily running as a Republican. I'm just hoping for that. But the thing is, if they run Bruce Jenner, who is far less of a Republican than Tulsi Gabbard, but if they run Jenner against Gabbard in the primary, I fear that enough of the population is mentally retarded enough to actually vote for Bruce Jenner out of sympathy because Tulsi Gabbard is a patriotic American that doesn't fall for the LGBTQIAP plus bullshit. That's my primary fear. We need Tulsi Gabbard as a president. We sure as hell don't need anyone like Caitlyn Jenner anywhere near a political office. And that's just my opinion. That's this video. I don't, whatever. That's it. Follow the links in the description. Knock yourselves out. Have a good time. And that's all for this video.